Welcome to our conversation around change management that we're having this month here at Cora. And just to remind you that this blog that we're doing is called the Roadmap to Transformative Services. And so, our entire goal with this blog is to really talk about innovation and the type of innovation we need as leaders right now in the nonprofit sector as we move forward. And so, I'm kind of guiding us over the next several months on lots of change that we've been through in an organization over the past several years, the impact that that's had on myself as a leader as well as on our organization, and what I think leaders need to be doing as we move forward, and what Cora is specifically doing as we move forward and think about innovation for services for children and families here in Philadelphia. And what leaders need to be thinking about when it comes to innovation. So, this month, we're talking very specifically on change management and what a nonprofit leader needs to be thinking about, as well as other leaders in the organization, in order to move an organization or move a department forward during change, whether it's significant change or it's the day-to-day change that we all experience on a regular basis. And in my blog this month, I specifically talked about 5 areas that I feel that a leader needs to be thinking about. And these weren't research, these are my personal opinions as the CEO of an organization for 8 years now and been with the organization for 20 that I think are important as we think about change management. And it's those 5 things are relationships, trust, communication, building consensus or ownership among our teams, and then the importance of a balance of authority and humility. And so now with me today, I have Melissa McCullough, who I've been working with for a large number of years. I've been very fortunate to work with for many years. Over the years, we've talked a lot about change. We've talked a lot about in her department, how to do things well, how to do things better. So I'm going to let her introduce herself to you, and then we're going to dive into the topic that she has at hand, which is the importance of building consensus among staff and ownership as we talk about change management. So, Melissa, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hello, I am Melissa McCullough. I am currently a clinical director in our clinical services division here at Cora, and I have been here almost 2 decades. 18 years I've been with Cora.
All right, let's dive into this topic of change. All right, so tell me, what do you personally need in order to shift gears when an organization is changing in your role?
Yeah, I think it's really important for me to understand why the change is happening. I really want to understand, what is this about? What's motivating it? How can it be helpful to the organization? How does it help us grow, become a better organization? I also am always interested in, what are the consequences if we don't change? And so those are things that, just for me, I like to understand before kind of jumping in, diving in. Those are important elements for me to be aware of. I think, like a lot of people, when I'm hearing changes coming, I personally want to know, how does this impact me? How does it impact my role, my job? How will I need to be different? If I have a good understanding of how it's going to impact me, I'll be a better leader. I'll be able to also carry that through with the people who will need my support through the change. And so I think about that. I am both optimistic and realistic at times, and so I also want to know, what are the pressure points when change is coming. Where are these areas that we really need to be mindful of that are going to create some challenges, so that if we can plan for what those pressure points might be
and mitigate the risks to that. I love one thing that you said that I haven't heard anybody else say yet, and I really appreciate it, is not only do you want to know why, but how important it is for you to know what is the impact if we don't change. And lots of times people don't ask that question, but many times if we don't ask that question or answer that question or don't change, there are risks to not changing. And I think it is important to communicate that. I think it's really valuable for staff to understand, if we don't change, then this could happen, which is also going to result often in change that's not going to be as good.
That's right.
And I think that that's really important to note. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I think I've thought about that when I have felt my own resistance to change. Is there's probably a consequence here, right, if we don't, and so I really need to focus on understanding that better.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. So what is most essential for you to trust and follow leadership in the midst of change?
Yeah, I was thinking about this idea of trust, and that it takes time to develop trust, and I've had the advantage of time here at an organization. In more recent years, I have really appreciated appropriate transparency, right? I know that there's a level that you can't always know, but being as transparent as possible has been incredibly helpful in continuing to maintain that trust, as well as bringing staff in for conversations, which has happened a lot. It's happened a lot recently. It allows staff to share what questions they have, what concerns they have, idea sharing. Even if those ideas aren't always able to be implemented, people have a voice in that. And I think for newer staff who don't have that time that I have, conversations like that really build this idea of value. They feel respected, and those things build trust. I also really like when a leader doesn't just talk about change, but also spends the time to revisit it. So evaluated it, kind of monitor how people are doing with it, and see where we need to shift, maybe share our progress on our change. Here's what we're doing really well. Here's where we really need to, make some changes for the better. So.
And this is why I picked you for this particular topic of building consensus among employees, because it's something that I think you do really well with your staff, and you understand the importance of from a change management perspective, right? Sometimes we can't build consensus. Like in COVID, for instance, when we first entered into COVID, it was like, we are moving and we're moving fast, and nobody knew what to do or how to do it. So building consensus was not going to happen. It needed, at least from my perspective, it needed the drive, it needed clarity of goals, clarity of vision, and this is where we're going, right? But most of the time in change, we can navigate it better, and building consensus of employees is super important. So let's walk into that a little bit, right? So how important to you, we've already talked a little bit about it, but how important to you is it to build a level of consensus among your employees before implementing that change? And how important is it to give enough time for employees to kind of own that change? Talk a little bit about that from your perspective.
Yeah, I think I am a consensus builder, but I don't know. I think it's ideal. I don't know that it's realistic, and I don't know that it's always necessary. And I think to your point on COVID, that was a really good example when we didn't have that opportunity. So again, ideal, but not necessary, not always realistic. And I think that what's probably more important is just the way that you prepare people or plan for the change. And so really just communicating with them, this change is happening. We really want some feedback and input. So I don't know that you're always going to get the consensus you're looking for, and that could be disappointing and frustrating.
Right. What do you think about staff owning it? Are there times here at Cora that we've kind of allowed staff, and maybe not, but we've allowed staff to kind of like own this with us? Like, we have to change, right? You talked about that. We have to change. We're going to change. Let's cast the vision as to why. Let's cast the vision as to not how necessarily, but why, where we're going, why we have to go there, what'll happen if we don't. And then there's the process of allowing staff, which you have talked about, input into that change, understanding and speaking into maybe problem solving some of that, or speaking to the impact that it might have, or how important do you think those pieces are in the midst of change when there's time for it?
Yeah, I think if part of the question maybe initially was, do you think that time really helps? I think it does for some people, but I think that there are people where time might not be the answer. It's more that idea of identifying a process for somebody to own it. Maybe somebody doesn't know how, and you have to pull them into why it's so valuable that they're a part of this, why we want to hear their voice, and why we want them to be working on this change with us, not just the change happening to them. And so I think that time piece is tricky. It's going to work for some people. It might not for others, but the idea of coming up with a process for having somebody own the change is more important.
I love what you just said, because some staff don't necessarily think about the importance of their voice, and you actually talked about this level of wanting to draw them in and even have them feel like they do have a voice that matters when we can, right? And they still may not, but it gives them an opportunity to grow, maybe in a way that they haven't grown. And it's interesting. It's really interesting. All right, so when do you think we have done change management well at Cora? Like, what are some of your experiences?
We've already touched on this a little bit. There's been like several changes I've been through that I think have gone really well, but for me, the overwhelming thing that we did really well was the early COVID days. I'll just call them the early COVID days. So we're, March 2020 when there wasn't time, there wasn't consensus, there wasn't a lot of planning. There was this idea that things were going to be different, and we had to change. And it was a scary time. And I think what this organization was able to do, in particular leadership, was strike a balance between really pushing people to work through that change, pulling other people, through that change, but really balancing it with this is why this matters, right? Very simply put, we help people and people need help right now, right? So this is why we need to change. I think it also was a very clear message that we need to take care of ourselves. And so staff were given a lot of flexibility, a lot of grace. I remember having conversations and reaching out, during some of the more challenging times, and the support that was given was really what helped kind of drive me through those more challenging times of change. I, in turn, was then able to be better with the staff that I supervise and manage to allow those same things for them. And so that idea of, as a middle manager, receiving that from my leaders, also being able to give that to the employees that were working with me directly. A lot of scary things happened during that time, but a lot of really beautiful things happened at this organization. It also came in with a lot of visibility. Even though we were all behind closed doors, you were very visible. People heard from you. You updated us on how things were going, and I think staff really needed that. They needed to understand that a leader was there going through this with us, but also really caring about the organization and caring about the people who continue to do the work. So that, I think we did that really well.
Yeah, well, there was no perfect time then. Yeah. So talk a little bit about how you think we haven't done a good job managing change, either over the last 10 years or since you've been here, well, over the last 10 years specifically, or even today, even recently.
Yeah, I think we're in it a little bit right now. I came to this organization 18 years ago in a different building. Everybody knew each other's first names. And here we are in a very, very different organization. And that's really exciting. And it also has resulted in a lot of change that I personally may not have understood or been ready for, or as an organization, did we really know the impact of growing and growing so quickly, while also really trying to maintain this balance of the values, the culture, this friendly atmosphere of everybody knowing each other. How do we do that as we're growing? And so I certainly have felt some of those growing pains for myself, having known the organization in a different way, and then also understanding as new staff are coming on that this is their experience, and hearing from them what they really love and like about having more people and more programs and more ways that we are reaching out to the community.
Yeah, and we're in a lot, right now, and I think almost every individual that I've interviewed, in change management talked about COVID as our whew, that was amazing. We really got through that really well, which was pretty incredible. And then the now, and each person brought in a little bit different of the now, and I think there are so many pieces to the now. Some of it is the aftermath of COVID the whole nation's facing. Where's hybrid work world in all of this, and how does this impact our staff? And we took on a service in the middle of COVID that we wanted to take on but didn't realize what the volume was going to be on it. We all these things kind of came flying at us at one time, and to, all these things that the nation is facing. And then in addition to that, by the way, Cora, you went from a 22 million to a 42 million at one, all that quickly, and you have all these external pressures, and you're dealing with post-COVID, right? And so how are we doing that and doing that well? And I think the impact on staff at varying levels of the organization is different depending on their position and their role. So anyway, that was great. And all right, with that being said, thank you, listeners, and hopefully you listen to these blogs on change management and hear from staff who have been through it. Thanks so much.